The Leatherstocking Tales, a series of stories written by James Fennimore Cooper in the early 19th century. Cooper wasn't far removed from the times and events he depicts. While this is fiction, they are written against the backdrop of those times and the places that they take place. Near the center of each novel is Natty Bumpo, who is the first of many rugged individualists in American literature. He is neither perfect nor always successful, but he does go about things with a self-reliance and integrity that is often admired in American culture. In The Deer Slayer, he is 24 years old, and it's 1742. Basically in the midst of the English colonial period in the United States, in what was to become the United States. Later, he's 40 years old in The Last of the Mohicans. And then in The Pathfinder, he's 2 years older. Then a lot of time passes, much time, and he's 70 years old in The Pioneers. And basically this is depicting the era in which the American Republic is expanding to the West. And finally, at 88, he dies with dignity in the prairie. But it's an interesting novel in that it depicts our rugged individualist against the growing bureaucracy that is the government in America. So pretty interesting for a modern American. If you've ever wondered where the American love of cowboys came from, here it is. Natty Bumpo. He is the core character in all these stories, but he's not always at the center of the action. In fact, in the novel I'm going to talk to you about the most, The Last of the Mohicans, also the most famous, he doesn't even appear until a couple of chapters in. He just kind of wanders out of the woods, and we've already been introduced to many of the other main characters in that novel. But Natty is an interesting character. He basically grew up with an Indian tribe, the Mohicans, which are part of a group of Indians called the Delawares, who lived on the East Coast near the Atlantic Ocean, and basically were among the first indigenous tribes to be pushed aside by the settlers coming in from Europe. But he gains a great deal of integrity and skill growing up among the Indians. Apparently, it's not clear to me just what happened, but apparently early in his life, something happened to his parents. So he grew up, he has a clear sense of his identity, but he also has a very abiding respect for the Indian tribes in which he grows to maturity. Natty has many names. Some of them reflect respect, and some of them maybe not so much. One of his early names in his youth is Straight Tongue. I suspect he was a little outspoken. And then there was the Pigeon. Not sure where that one came from. And Lapier, I'm not sure that that was a particularly respectful one either. But as he got a little older and he got a little better at what he did, he became the Deer Slayer, which happens to be the title of the first novel in which he appears. Natty is very seldom referred to as Natty or Bumpo. He almost always has a new name in every novel, and sometimes in alternating chapters. That sort of, I think this goes with the tradition in many cultures of we kind of protect our name, and we go by what we're known for. And this is how Natty evolves as he goes through the various novels. Hawkeye, La Longue Carabine. Um, all of these have to do with his skills with the early American rifle. The American rifle was a major innovation. This is a time period when muskets were the primary means of defense and means of hunting, and they weren't particularly accurate. That's part of why European armies of the day lined up and fired in together at their enemies, because no given person could hope to hit them. With the rifle, it's different. With the rifle, you have a great deal more accuracy, and this gave the American hunters a major advantage. And our man Bumpo becomes very good and develops quite a reputation as a shooter. There's a Pathfinder, and later on, the Leatherstocking itself. Clearly, he's not buying his stockings at the local wool store. He's making them up from animal skins. And finally, in his final novel, he's simply the trapper. And Natty is well, he is the character that has become quite well known, and as you see at the bottom of the slide, he was even depicted in Soviet stamps. So he's well known. But there's a couple of other characters in the early novels, and one Jiginkakuk is carries through all the novels, almost to the last. He doesn't quite make it to the last novel, but he makes it through all the earlier ones. And then there's his son Uncas, who is primarily seen in The Last of the Mohicans. The question is, which is the last of the Mohicans? And it's not as simple as the last born necessarily being the last. So you have to read to find out which is which. I think you need to know something about the period in which these novels take place, and particularly the most famous of the novel has had the most movies made about it, and that is The Last of the Mohicans. We're talking about a period in which what was to become the United States, the English colonies, covered a relatively small portion of North America. Much of it was controlled by the French. Parts of Canada were at that point also controlled by the English, and Spain retained a great deal of control in the area that was to become the American Southwest and Florida. And then there's a whole big area out in the northwest of what was to become the United States that was, well, basically claimed by everybody from the Russians to the English to the French to the Spanish. So that was kind of a contest. Well, they were all contested areas, and that's what brings us to the war that is taking place at the time of the Last of the Mohicans, and this is in about 1753. And this whole novel, however, takes place in a very small area, and this area, which today is modern New York and would be seen as somewhere between urban and suburban in most cases, was the wild frontier at that time. This was where people were going to get away from the cities and to establish new places. And that line that runs down between the French and the English colonies, that was much contested. And just as today, many wars are fought through other people, the French and the English had native allies. They had Indian allies. So in the novel, we see the Mohicans on one side of the coin allied with primarily with Natty, not so much with the British, but allied with Natty. And on the other, many tribes that are working with and for the French. This is a really rugged area that we're looking at. This whole northeastern part of what was to become the United States is a lot of mountains, a lot of major lakes, a lot of major rivers. So it's not an easy area to wander around, and it is not a good area in which to try to conduct warfare in the manner that either the French or the English had originally done in Europe.